Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Warcraft video. Today we've got a pretty exciting one because there is a fair amount of lore to get into. The intro cinematic for this patch has, of course, just came out. You've probably all seen it, and when you dive into the lore of this one and a lot of the imagery and what we see, there really is quite a lot that we can extrapolate. And then also many different connections to aspects of the game that some players will have seen already, especially the Horde players, less so the Alliance, and a lot that we really can extrapolate out into the future, as well as one or two interesting little tie-ins to the Legion expansion. So we're going to kick it off with the beginning. The Horde fleet is leading the Alliance. Now that's not what the Alliance think. The Alliance think that they are hot on pursuit, that they're about to get the last of the Horde fleet because, of course, narratively speaking, the Horde fleet pretty much got crushed. Now, when you look at the Alliance fleet, what do you see? There are both, like, Alliance Stormwind boats. There are also Kaltirian boats.
Yeah, they're
so
running them
like
the fuck down.
Navy is off
because the
somewhere
Alliance
else.
is better.
This pretty much is the bulk of the Alliance Navy. That's what it seems to be. Now, you know, the Alliance, they're emotionally driven in this. Gen is going there trying to get the enemy. Yet, when you look over at the Horde boats, what's Nathanos doing? He's just, you know, coolly having a look at Xal'atath. And this really leads us off into the first bit of explanation, right?
That seems like kind of a bad thing. I mean, you have like this old god dagger and he's just kind of letting it lead the way. Seems like a mistake.
For this cinematic. So, why does Nathanos have Xal'atath? Well, it's pretty simple.
Plot device.
Sylvanas says that her end game pretty much is, is coming, and he instructs him to take the blade and to use it to guide him and go, you know, in the ocean. Now, it's very, very obvious that Sylvanas knows what's going to happen. And she says to use it as an opportunity to weed out internal enemies within the Horde. So, you know, at that point, she is suspecting the likes of Bellular, Lorthamar, etc., who, of course, are on that boat with Nathanos. And then also, from just a purely military perspective, if she knows she is, let's just say she knows she's going to lose the 4 boats that she sends, but if she can draw out the bulk of the Alliance Navy,
Okay, let me finish this.
well, she'll lose 4, they'll lose a hell of a lot more. So even if it's a Pyrrhic victory, it still is a victory, and Sylvanas is not really the type, it seems, to make a distinction between an absolute, great, clean, decisive victory and a Pyrrhic one. She pretty much just wants to win. Now, of course, that's just the military strategy.
Probably true.
But the deeper thing here is a little bit more bizarre in terms of the character motivation. So Sylvanas knows where this blade comes from. And that does make all of this just a little bit more spooky. So Sylvanas knows where this blade comes from the Crucible of Storms. And, I mean, the player, you know, it's so weird. Whenever you pick up the blade, your character is pretty much feels a compulsion to take it to her. That's essentially how Blizzard write it. It's not really a player choice. And it does make you wonder just how much agency does Sylvanas have in what's going on with this blade. She, of course, thinks she's completely in control, and she thinks that she's going to use this blade to lure, to lure the Alliance fleet into a big trap. But the thing is, how does she know about that trap? How does she know what's going to happen whenever Nathanos follows the blade into the sea and draws out the Alliance Navy?
Yeah, I never
Has she been
thought of
talking to Azshara? Well, seemingly she hasn't. Has she been talking to N'Zoth? Has she been hearing old god whispers? That's the thing. For her to use the blade in this military strategy, she's going to have to know about this big trap that's about to be sprung. And that means that she's in communications with somebody who is a little bit spooky and dangerous. Now, the one way they could get around this is maybe saying that Helya, who's of course connected to the oceans and has the Cabal...
They just never explain it. Like, that's basically one way they could solve it, is that they just brush it under the rug and just keep going with the story. And you just never really explain this fully, and everything's okay. It's not even a big deal. It's pretty much it. I think that's basically how it could work. If somebody has this rare up on their server, please invite me, Zach. I do have an alt code. If you can invite me on Kel'Thuzad.
here. Maybe Helya tips Sylvanas off to what's going on, and
okay.
maybe Sylvanas can know these things without being corrupted by N'Zoth or in a scheme with Azshara through Helya.
Alrighty.
But other than that, it definitely does look rather fishy from her indeed. But anyway, let's get back to the cinematic.
It's
so when you look at
2,
Thanos,
4, like
yeah,
that.
it's pretty darn clear that
remember.
the guy knows he's about to have a unpleasant experience, but that he knows exactly what's going on. He does not look kind of worried. He almost, I mean, he sort of cracks a little smile, doesn't he? So yeah, he knows what the crack is. We then cut down to Azshara, and she's actually talking to one of the characters who is a raid boss in the upcoming raid.
It's the first
and
boss.
She talks about preparing the Tidestone of Golgoneth. Now, this is quite an interesting thing. We later on find out that, I think she says something along the lines of, I've not left the Tidestone unguarded like they did. So essentially, she just went to the Tomb of Sargeras and picked it up, or, her agents did, and that's it.
Hey.
Now, that's quite odd, because
yeah,
she spent so much time trying to get it in
she's
Legion,
kind of hot for a fish.
Just after
Yeah,
the
she
Legion
is.
expansion ends, she just goes in, picks the thing up, and danders off. Now, that's quite bizarre, because the Tomb of Sargeras is a pretty darn spooky place. We sealed it off with the Pillars of Creation for a very important reason.
I forgot what the reason
later
was.
on, right, whenever we decide
remember.
to sacrifice the power of our artifacts, what happens, like, why do we do that? Well, Magni says that we could seal the wound that Sargeras' sword had left. We could seal that using the Pillars of Creation, but they are, they're sealing the Tomb of Sargeras. We can't unseal the tomb. And that clearly means that the tomb being unsealed is a very bad thing indeed. Now, I do find it quite odd that we all seem to agree that sealing the tomb is a really important thing, and for some reason, just the Alliance and Horde and mages or whatever, nobody actually puts any effort into guarding the place. That is very odd indeed. She seems to have just dandered in there and picked it up.
Hey, not a
but
big
this
deal.
would be another example
Just let
of
it
Blizzard
happen.
doing what Blizzard have been trying to do a little bit more of, which is having things pretty much be our fault, and or at least be tied into our past actions. Now, the tomb being unsealed, what could that essentially mean? Well, I mean, it's hard to know. That is it could be a plot hole. It could just be lazy writing, but
yeah,
that being
could
unsealed, that could open the way to a lot of the Void Forces doing something that's rather spooky and dangerous. And if we think about pacts and characters doing things with each other, well, who is out there in the cosmos? Xalatath. Now, Xalatath, of course, she was in the Black Blade of the Empire. Of course, no longer, but she's out there, and we'll cover this more in an upcoming lore video, but Syntharia might actually be out there as well. You've got the Void Ethereal, so you've got all these Void Forces.
What?
Now, them using that pillar to invade Azeroth.
I thought we killed Syntharia. How the fuck did that happen?
What?
Oh, yeah, Sinestra, yeah.
Yeah, that was Sinestra.
Yeah, okay.
That would just be Legion 2.0. So I don't think they're actually going to do that. But it could be a future plot point that they essentially are teasing in this patch's cinematic. Anyway, with that, she sends her minion off to go and use the Tidestone. And then she has a little bit of a conversation with N'Zoth. And just broadly here, the framing of all of this is really quite well done. The way that she is sort of putting on that face for her subordinate, but then kind of that melts away into the true her whenever she sort of turns around to the camera to address N'Zoth. Now, with N'Zoth, what do we see? Well, we see very clearly a reversal in situations. So in the Warbringers Azshara cinematic, she was, you could say she was in quite a spot of bother.
Yeah,
she essentially was going to drown. And whenever N'Zoth appeared to her, well, the power dynamics were quite clear. He was the powerful one. Whether she lived or died, that was entirely on his whim.
True.
Now, of course, they sort of use that to show really her will, right? Because even though everything is stacked against her, even though she's completely weak and vulnerable, she pretty much rejects his offer at the very start and says, no, I'm going to be your queen, not your minion. And of course, all of that stuff happens. And then when we look at this, she is kind of teasing him for how he's locked up there, unable to burst out. She talks about the plans they've both had for a very long time, and that now it's time for him to watch her do what she does best. And that really can mean quite a few things indeed. Put very simply, it could just be her being pretty much the most powerful sorceress on the planet, and maybe, you know, using the Tidestone of Golganeth. It could also be her referring to her being very good at,
crazy
she
bitch.
thinks anyway, manipulating people and doing all of that stuff.
Yep.
Which very much is something that as you go through Nazjatar, you'll notice. Much like the Lich King, she sort of is always taunting you and playing with you and toying with you, and I believe that could also be referring to what will go down in the final confrontation with her at the end of the raid.
I bet we're not. There's no way she's gonna die.
But
there's
I'm
no
going to very
way.
clearly mark it because I'd say that is spoiler territory because it is based on some in-game models and files, so it's not really stuff you will have seen in the game just yet. But what's extremely clear is that the power dynamics have shifted. She is the one in power. He is the one who's a little bit more in need. He, of course, needs her to release him from the prison, seemingly using the Heart of Azeroth, based off all of the dialogue that we've heard, where it essentially seems like we're just being lured into a trap where the heart is going to, and the quote from her is, shatter the prison of a god. So, all of that stuff is pretty spicy, but she's quite vain. And she believes in herself a lot,
well,
right?
fuck, man.
And I believe that it could be quite likely that N'Zoth appears to her so weak in this sort of wispy apparition.
Yeah.
Even though he could probably sort of, you know, enter her mind like he did in the Warbringers cinematic.
That's
and
what I was
seem
thinking.
powerful. He could do that.
Wasn't he in the trap then, too?
But he doesn't here. I think he chooses to appear to look so weak. Like, you know, his tentacle comes up and she just sort of pushes it away, really indicating visually that she's stronger than him. He's, you know, he's even below her. She's in the more dominant position, and compare her to what she looked like in Warbringers Azshara. Well, here, she's so much more strong and big and powerful and framed to be that way by the cinematic. But I think that's just how N'Zoth is choosing to appear. I think that he wants her to feel like that. We've got the, you know, we've got the line, the god of the deep. I think it's his heart is black ice. I believe that's from the puzzle box. I think that's from the puzzle box. It's one of the lines associated with N'Zoth anyway.
Okay.
So, to me, it really seems like he's playing her, even though she maybe thinks that she is playing him. Because one thing that has seemed kind of possible is that she would try to seize power herself. Because it really has seemed like they're...
Well, how are you going to seize power? Like, I don't know if that's... I don't know about that, dude, because, like, I mean, N'Zoth's an old god. Azshara's an elf. You know what I mean? Like, come on. Like, really?
Wait, isn't she like one of the most powerful elves that ever existed, ever?
But she's an elf. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, she's still just an elf.
Well, yeah, but, I mean, Broxigar was just an orc.
He only damaged Sargeras because he had the axe.
Yeah, but she's magic.
It's not the same, dude. I mean, like, old gods, listen, like, they had, like, literally the Titans had to grab an old god and pull him out of the earth. That's the only one. And which one was that? Yasiraj? I forgot even which one that was. And, no, the old gods are too powerful. Like, there's no way that Azshara is going to have control over the old god. That's so fucking stupid. Azshara is as powerful as Sargeras. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Sargeras literally is bigger than the planet. Like, how's she going to be more powerful than him whenever he can literally cut the planet that she lives on in half? I mean, does that make any fucking sense to you?
Both. They're both pretty duplicitous, nasty pieces of work as characters. So really with this, it's just a matter of where Blizzard go with the plot. Either Azshara tries to double-cross him first, he tries to double-cross her first, so maybe she is manipulating him, he is manipulating her, or they're both manipulating each other, and it's just whoever, you know, pulls the trigger first. But anyway, after that, the Tidestone is used, the waves are pulled back, and what's kind of interesting is they're pulled back in such a way that the Horde ships pretty much will just fall straight down.
Okay.
Because you'll notice in the next shot, the Horde ships aren't there. You only see the Alliance ships. And that, you know, that of course means that we get to see them, you know, dramatically fall into Nazjatar. And that is what leads us directly into the content of this patch. Even if everyone on those boats died, including Nathanos, Sylvanas has already won. The whole thing, right, was that the Horde was kind of losing the war on paper. Their fleet was smaller, they'd suffered major setbacks.
The Horde sucks, that's why they were losing.
Yet here she has sort of level the playing
Yeah,
field.
they're losing because they
She's taken
suck.
out the Alliance fleet, and do remember, we went to Kulturas and Zandalar to get their fleets. Well, the Zandalari fleet was crushed by the Alliance. The Kulturan fleet has now pretty much been crushed by the Horde, so Sylvanas has played her game pretty well. It's just all about what are the consequences of Nathanos continuing to follow the Blade. What does the Blade want now? What is N'Zoth's plan if he is the one who's more directly controlling the Blade?
Okay.
And that's really the thing. The Blade is a black box. We don't know what's happening there. We don't know if the Blade itself has latent stuff that's whispering to Sylvanas or Nathanos. We don't know if N'Zoth is using the Blade as a medium to whisper to them. We have absolutely zero idea. And with that covered,
Nathanos
I want
studied
to
the
just
Blade.
very
That's right.
quickly talk about a little bit more of the spicy speculation.
Okay,
So,
here we go.
spoiler warning, but here we go. In the PTR files, there have been some things that kind of indicate that a bit of a trap is sprung, that things somewhat go awry at the end of the Azshara encounter.
Yeah, duh.
And when I was going through Model Viewer, guess what I found? I looked at the death animation for Azshara. She doesn't die. She doesn't die in the death animation. She is just left on the floor panting. A little bit like Garrosh. Whenever you defeat Garrosh, he's just kind of like lying down because, you know, you don't kill him. That's the whole point. So that really does make me think that Azshara survives this fight. And I think that's a good thing. I think it really would be a pity if Azshara just appeared, villain of the week, lop her head off, job done. Now the thing is, what is the context of her survival? Does she get double-crossed by N'Zoth? Does N'Zoth essentially just try to cast her aside? Does she maybe try to ally with us? I actually could see a reality where Blizzard might try to have Azshara be a sort of chaotic neutral character who's
we
just
already have the
out for
Lich
herself.
King. We don't need another
I could
one.
see that happening. I could see them doing it. I don't necessarily think it's the best thing that could
Yeah.
possibly happen. But with the context that Azshara
And
likely
Illidan
does survive the fight, that does, you know, it casts a bit more, not doubt, but sort of speculation. It invites speculation to the exchange between Azshara and N'Zoth that we saw
Naga
in the
race?
cinematic and just what its nature is. It's not like we're going to defeat her and then have her still be tied to him, allied to him, and for us to let her live. That's not going to happen. That does not make much sense. So either she tries to betray him, or he tries to betray her, and for whatever reason, we choose not to kill her. So that certainly is an interesting thing. And then, of course, we need to take this in the context of Ian saying that the 8.3 cinematic will pretty much leave there being no doubt as to the final villain of this expansion. So right now, it seems pretty darn clear that the final villain of this expansion is going to be your boy N'Zoth. However, it could be Sylvanas, who knows? But it's pretty likely N'Zoth at this stage. They could subvert our expectations. We all know
She's too
how
hot
they
to
love
die.
do
That's
things
true.
like that these days. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm left with this. A pretty cool cinematic, but it's just when you go through the implications of everything that is shown and sort of talk about the lore connections that this cinematic has to the things they've established in the game, that it just does get a bit more interesting. And it's also good to fill everyone in because, of course, Alliance players will not have seen a bunch of this storyline with Sylvanas, so it's good to clue everyone into what's actually going on. Anyway, that's it for this video.
What the fuck,
Let me know
man?
what you thought about the cinematic, what your analysis is of it, and with that covered, I will see you next time.
Wow. So they could make Azshara like ally with us against N'Zoth? I mean, I don't know. I mean, that feels...
Oh, God. I would hate that.
Really?
Yeah, that feels too... I don't know.
I mean, what has she really done wrong?
What?
Yeah, what has she really done wrong? The Legion Azra. Yeah, that is... Yeah. But besides that, everything else seems okay, right?
Didn't she cause the sundering?
Well, that was whenever she opened the Wall of Eternity or whatever, right? Well, isn't that how it happened? Like, I don't even remember. Yeah, so that was like the same thing.
That's pretty bad. I don't know if you know that.
That was bad. Yeah, it's true.